am live on YouTube. So today I will be answering your astrology questions. If you guys have any questions, feel free to comment below. If you guys are watching the replay and you want your own natal chart reading, you guys can find that on my website in the description box below under the readings tab. I do natal chart readings and progress natal chart readings. So let's see what questions the people have for us today. Hey Kat, you said birth chart question. If you have a Libra in the 12th house, Saturn, everyone tells you that you have a Scorpio ascendant. However, your chart says Libra rising, your loss, maybe I can help you. Yeah, honestly, it depends what system you're looking at it through, okay? So the rising sign is usually going to be in the first house. So if you're looking at it in the Placidus system, hey, welcome. Oh my gosh, let me know what you would like to know. Welcome, welcome, welcome to all the people joining. I'm just going in order of the questions. So yes, all I can really say is when you're looking at the ascendant, descendant, midheaven, and IC axis, you really have to see what resonates with you and what's going to give you the most amount of hints to see which one of the two it's going to be. Look at the IC, because that's going to be your fourth house and that's going to be your upbringing and your home. Welcome, welcome, welcome to all the people joining. I'm answering astrology questions or metaphysical questions if you guys have any, or whatever you guys want to talk about today. Feel free to comment below. I will be going in order of the questions. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, make sure you guys like the video. 2024 is interesting. I wrote on my Instagram. So if you guys are interested, you guys can follow my Instagram. Although on Instagram, I do usually post just like day-to-day types of stuff, but sometimes I'll write things here and there and I post on my story. So for 2024, I see it being a year of karma. So it's like a balancing of the scales. So the way that I see 2024 energetically, I see it like if you're doing the inner work, you're going to be rewarded. And it's kind of going into like that separation of like the shadow self and the light self, right? So people who are operating out of the shadows, like the way the energy is going to start basically working is because we're going through the acceleration of energy, everything's happening faster. So it's going to be really, really important to see what are you thinking, because whatever you're thinking is going to manifest instantaneously. So if you're in the positive like thoughts and the positive mindset, that's going to manifest. And if you're in the negative mindset, that's also going to manifest. So that's kind of how I see 2024 playing out. I kind of see it being like a balance. I also wrote like the tide is turning, like you reap what you sow. Like that's kind of like the vibe overall, okay, for 2024. It really is kind of like a balancing of the scales. And I do really feel like people who do the inner work will be rewarded. Hey everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome to the live. I'm just going in order of the questions. So feel free to comment below and also make sure you guys like the live. Happy New Year, happy New Year. You said Pluto's moving into your 8th house this year. You have Saturn in Aquarius, late degrees. You have time, and then you said your moon is in Pisces. What can you expect? All you can find in research is doom and gloom. Honestly, you guys, don't worry about the Pluto transit. I know a lot of people freak out about the Pluto transit, but it's like you can't hyper focus on just one transit. Do you know what I mean? Like there's so many things that are happening. First of all, the Pluto transit is a long transit, okay? So it's going to be over an extended period of time, and it's like the changes are going to be so subtle and incremental. So it's going to be over that 19-year span. So it's like from day to day, you might not necessarily feel the change, but when you get to the end of the Pluto transit, at the end of the 19-year cycle, that's when you'll be like, oh my gosh, I changed and I transformed so much. Now, what I'm doing right now is I'm recording the Pluto series, but that won't be up for a while because I have so many other things as well that I will be posting. But with Plutonian energy and with Scorpionic energy, basically the way that the energy works is it's like a pendulum, okay? So you go through the extreme of the energy until you neutralize in the middle. So when it's going through your 8th house, you might be going through intense shadow work, for example. You might be in this extreme of the shadow and then you go into that extreme until you neutralize. So whatever house you have it going through, like that's where you're gonna experience the most amount of change and transformation. And it's like in that area of your life, you'll eventually become like unstoppable in a way, right? Like it's the area that in a way you're mastering, but you are gonna go through that pendulum swing. That's just the nature of Plutonian and Scorpionic energy. Welcome, welcome, welcome to all the people joining. You're welcome. You said more Libra in the first half of life and now much more Scorpio rising. Yeah, so there's that as well. So it's like we go through secondary progressions, right? So if you started out with one of the rising signs, eventually you will progress into the other rising sign as well. So it makes sense that that resonates. But yeah, you always want to see what's going on with that particular axis. That's always going to give you a good sign if you're not sure. You said Tina Clary or Tina Clara Mary, you said, how will Aquarius moon in the first house of Capricorn be affected in 2024 transits? So that's something you have to look at the whole chart, okay? So when people do those videos and they're like, 2024 is going to be like this for a Libra rising and like this for a Sagittarius rising, it's very general, right? So everybody has their own chart and you have to really, really see what's going on with all of the planetary transits. So it's really, really hard to say what's going to be happening because it's like, you know, maybe something else is going to cancel something else out, right? So you can look at those videos for fun to kind of get an overall idea. You can take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes people freak out when they hear certain things, you know, but it's like, just take it with a grain of salt because it's like, when you look at a whole year, first of all, the year is long and there's so many transits that are taking place, and then it's going to affect everybody differently. Like not every Capricorn rising is going to have the same experience. You know what I mean? Let's see. How can you make sure to access as much freedom frequency for yourself in 2024 as possible? That's a really good question. Make sure you do the inner work, okay? So that's pretty much all I have to say about that because like I mentioned earlier as well, it's like, it's going into that separation, right? Of like the light side and the shadow side. And it's like, because we're going into the higher frequencies, like karma is becoming instantaneous almost, right? So it's like if you do something shadowy, it's kind of getting to the point energetically where it's like people should quote unquote know better. So it's like, let's say you try to like scam or you try to like lie about something or whatever it is, like it's gonna catch up with you maybe even on the same day. Do you know what I mean? Like that's just like an example. Obviously there's so many other shadow traits that can take place, but that's kind of how it's going to be working energetically at least. And this is from my own opinion, okay? Just from what I've tapped into for 2024. So it's like if you want to be like that highest freedom frequency and highest vibration possible, try to always align yourself with the light and see what your shadow traits are, maybe what your lower chakra wounds are, maybe things that are holding you back and pulling you down, okay? So you'll really always feel it within yourself when you're being pulled down is really what that is. Hey Katie, how are you doing? You said Pluto opposite ascendant, Pisces rising 28 degrees. You have Pluto in Libra in the 7th house. Can I give you tips on this? Yes, of course. You said Pluto opposite ascendant, so that's a lot of transformation. Oh, you just deleted your message. Can you re-type your message? Let's see. You're welcome, Saraswati Lifestyle. Tina Clary Mary says there's no videos. You're asking about Aquarius moon in the 1st house of Capricorn. What were you asking up here? Yeah, you were asking for 2024. Yes, that's something that you have to look at the entire natal chart to see what's going on. Let's see. And I don't do predictive astrology at all. I just look at it as your personality, what traits do you have, what karmas do you have, and what challenges might you have in this lifetime. Let's see, Interconnecting Authentically says, you're welcome. You said you definitely don't want to hyper-focus there, but what does QNT transit in your 8th house you dread? So yes, absolutely. I know the 8th house, any sort of like 8th house stuff is always intense because it's like, especially Pluto going through there, right? Because it's like, it's a lot of change and it's a lot of transformation, but you know, you come out of it on the other side, absolutely, you become stronger is really what that is. You're welcome. Oh, you have moon opposite Pluto. Moon opposite Pluto's power struggle with the mother, okay? It's also going to then in turn be power struggle with anybody who's operating out of the feminine energy. So it could be your friends, it could be your manager, for example. Like you're constantly gonna have this power struggle with people who are in the feminine energy is really what that is. Yasmin says, can I tell you about how to heal yourself better when you have Scorpio 3rd house? Yes, you're welcome. Okay. So Scorpio in the 3rd house is actually an interesting placement. It gives you the undertone of having Mercury and Scorpio, and also if you have Pluto and Scorpio, or sorry, if you have Pluto in the 3rd house, this might resonate with you as well. So Scorpio in the 3rd house is a very interesting placement because I find these people to be super, super intelligent, but at the same time, it's like the Scorpionic energy, when it's in the shadow, it can go into overthinking, it can go into paranoias, it can go into fears, like all of like the lower chakra things. So it's like when you have Scorpio going through your 3rd house, you basically have to integrate a lot of this lower wounding is really what that is, like the fears, the paranoias, all these types of things for you to go into the divine of Scorpio, because it's like when you have Scorpio in the 3rd house, you can literally be a medium, for example, right? You're always playing chess, you're always 10 steps ahead. But it's like at the same time, having Scorpio in the 3rd house is like you know, you can kind of try to come to, you know, a conclusion about everything. You know what I mean? Like mentally prepare yourself for every sort of outcome, you know, where it's like, okay, if I do this, well, then this can happen under all these 10 outcomes. If I do that, well, these 10 outcomes, and you're always trying to like mentally prepare yourself. So that's kind of like a shadow of Scorpio. And usually that does come from some sort of trauma and wounding. So after you integrate like those lower chakra wounds and the traumas and all these types of things, well, then you can go into the divine version of Scorpio. So this is what I mean by the Scorpionic Plutonian energy going through the pendulum swing, okay? That's Scorpionic energy, right? So it goes through the extreme. So you might go through that extreme unhealed energy, right? But you can also go into the extreme of like the crown, right? When you have Scorpio in the third house, where it's like you're just in your imagination all the time, and you know, you're like kind of making up imaginary scenarios in your mind. Sometimes Scorpio in the third house, or Pluto in the third house, or even Mercury and Scorpio can struggle with speech. They might not necessarily be the most communicative types of people. Sometimes for them, a lot of conversations can happen in their minds. So you guys might kind of expect people to know what you guys want, or maybe, you know, you think you said it to the person, but you didn't say it. So communication is going to be something that you guys really have to work through. And this is where you're transforming through at the same time. But at the same time, it's like the energy can be very powerful, right? When you have Scorpio in here, because again, it's like, it's that Scorpionic energy, but when it's in the shadow, it can be cutthroat, it can be really blunt, it can be really mean sometimes. It can also bring up people's shadows to the surface, like just say them, you know, sometimes it's just kind of like you say things without even realizing, especially when you're unaware. So that's Scorpio in the third house, but overall hyper intelligent, right? Because it's like you see everything from all perspectives. You're always going to be into the occult. You're going to be into astrology. And eventually, like if you were to work on your psychic gifts and abilities, you could become a medium as well. Okay. You could really become super psychic. You probably already are intuitive, but if you work on it, like you can actually like start to use these gifts to benefit you in your own life is really what that is. Yes, thank you. Interconnecting authentically. You're awesome. Yes, absolutely. Make sure you guys like the live. Let me know what other questions you have. I'm just going in order, so I will get to everyone. You said 100% agree. You have to be careful what you're thinking about in the past couple of weeks, especially when you're with a person on the same level. Yeah, so that's the thing with manifestation. Like if there's two people that are working toward the same thing, like the manifestation comes through even faster. Jupiter retrograde in the first house. So you can make money through the self, okay, but it's retrograde. So you think about it more rather than act on it, okay? So that's that Jupiter retrograde in the first house. It's like when it comes to money, you can maybe spend more time dreaming and thinking, oh my gosh, I can do it like this and it can be like that. But, you know, you have to kind of learn to externalize the energy with retrogrades, right? Because it's more so internalized. Now, what I will say is when the planet is actually retrograde in the transit, you're actually in your energy, right? So for you, you might be thriving during this time. Like when there's a Jupiter retrograde, you might, let's say, get a new job or start a new business or whatever it is, right? While everybody else might be going through some other types of financial things, okay? So that's kind of like the idea with Jupiter retrograde. I do have a video on retrogrades, you guys, if you're interested. The house is always going to tell you more. So for example, Jupiter retrograde in the first house, it's the house of the self. So when you have Jupiter in the first house, you can basically make money through anything to do with the self. So it can be anytime maybe you're like walking at a job, something like retail or construction or dance, or it could be like you being a leader or a go-getter or whatever it is, anything of this sort, okay? Maybe starting your own business or being a manager or starting your own company, like whatever it is, anytime you are basically, you know, you're the one that's bringing through the money, like it's you who's doing it. That's kind of how you activate abundance for yourself. But retrograde, once again, you have to work harder to pull the energy out is really what that is. Oh yeah, I'm so glad that you agree. You're welcome. Let's see, what else are you guys saying in here? Moon in Pisces. Moon in Pisces can sometimes really go into the crown, okay? Because also it's like it's very feeling based. So when you have Moon in Pisces, like you're a dreamer, like full blown dreamer, okay? That's that Moon in Pisces energy. But again, it's kind of like similar to what I was even saying about Scorpio in the third house, okay? For a lot of these water placements, what happens is, you know, when it's ungrounded, the energy, it goes more into the crown. Now, when you're in the crown and you're dreaming, it depends where you're at vibrationally in terms of your belief system to see what are you in your crown about, if that makes sense. If you're someone maybe who's had a lot of maybe negative experiences or, you know, traumatic experiences where you're trying to mentally prepare yourself, like that's the shadow of the crown where you're constantly thinking and overthinking everything, okay? And then you also have another shadow of the crown, which is maybe you're just dreaming all the time and not acting on your dreams. So Moon in Pisces is like this, okay? So how can we work with this energy while starting to put things into action, for example? So Moon in Pisces is going to be very good, let's say, in music and dreamy things and film and theater and writing, all these types of things. But what happens, I find, with like Moon in Pisces and Piscean energy overall, and like 12th house and Neptunian influence, is like these people spend so much time dreaming about things and they struggle to anchor it into the physical reality because they're in the crown, right? They're like, oh my gosh, when it's like this and it's like that. And then it's like when it's not anchoring, then they might get disappointed. Or actually what could also happen is they can anchor it and then they might be disappointed with the results because it's not what they had envisioned, right? So then you guys might go into escapism, okay? You guys might go into escapism through different things. Moon in Pisces can be eating sometimes as well, but it can be escapism on a range. It could constantly be, you know, in that daydreaming type of world as well, but it's psychic, right? Because anytime we're leaving the body, you're going into the psychic realms. It's just a matter of learning how to maneuver the energy is really, really what that is. And also learning to have boundaries is really important for all water placements, because otherwise you're merging to people, okay? So really, really, you know, learning yourself, self-awareness, learning your emotions, how you feel about things, learning your own triggers, like all these things are important for water placements, because when you don't know your own triggers and you merge, okay? You merge to the people around you and then you might internalize that person's stuff, and then, you know, before you know it, you're purging for another person. And it's like, how did this even happen? Like, how did you even get here, you know? Hey everyone, welcome to the live. I'm just going in order. You said there is a meme that says you got to stay grounded out there, y'all, but the photo is literally a girl who is infused in the clouds, and you said you feel like that's you with your moon and Mercury and Pisces. Yeah, absolutely. That's for any sort of Piscean 12th house like influence. Thank you. Neptune and Sagittarius squaring your Jupiter and Pisces. So everything that I was just saying about being in the crown and dreaming, it's going to apply to you basically, okay? So Neptune is now squaring your Jupiter, okay? So one planet wants to do this and the other planet wants to do this. Neptune wants to dream. That's the thing everyone has to understand about Neptune, okay? Neptune is dreaming. That's where they thrive, you know? So Neptune, wherever you guys have Neptune in your chart, you have to figure out how can you ground that energy. That's how you can most prosper, okay, with that energy, because it's like, otherwise you're up here all the time. You're dreaming and then you're escaping through the dreaming, right? So when I say ground it, you know, you have to figure out how can you act on it. If you have a dream, if you have a goal, you have to figure out a practical way to anchor it into the physical reality. Otherwise you're just in the crown all the time, okay? Now, Neptune and Sag, that's the overall generation, okay? So the house for Neptune is going to affect you more. You will still have some of the energies. Yes, it is generational, but you will still take on some of the energies that the overall generation takes on. So Neptune and Sag generation kind of, you know, has that area of freedom blurred. Maybe the area of entrepreneurship, okay, blurred. Sometimes Sagittarius can deal with entrepreneurship or travel. You know, there might be a lot of like dreaming of traveling, but not actually acting on it, or dreaming of having your own business, but then, you know, struggling to maybe ground it down. Now it's squaring your Jupiter. So Jupiter is saying, and you have it in Pisces. So Jupiter is saying, I want to make money this way. Neptune's saying, okay, well, let's dream about it a little bit longer. So that's kind of what it is. But what I also will say with that particular axis or that particular aspect is that you could also make money through dreamy like things, okay? So it could be through photography, it could be through romance, it could be through like writing romance novels, especially Jupiter and Pisces, okay? It could even be through spirituality or metaphysics, or it could be through film, it could be through theater, like anything that's dreamy and romantic, you could make money through that, but you have to figure out a way to anchor it. So actually sitting down and maybe making a schedule, you know, if you want to write a book, okay, I'm gonna, you know, write every day for 3 hours a day, and then after I'm going to edit it, and maybe setting a goal. I find for like Piscean energy, having a deadline and having kind of like that end goal in mind helps the energy as well. Otherwise the energy kind of goes too much with the flow. Also, because Piscean energy is like this, it usually attracts a lot of Virgo types of people who will create that container for you, right? But sometimes those people can be opportunists. So figuring out how can you create the container for yourself, the schedule, the discipline, the boundaries, you know, even if you don't feel like it. I mean, obviously seeing actually how do you feel, right? Like if you're actually feeling off, maybe, you know, going with that. But sometimes it's too much of like, well, I'll just chill today and I'll go with the flow and this, and then nothing gets done, you know? Hey, welcome everyone. How are you guys? And Happy New Year. I'm just going in order, so I will get to everyone at the bottom. You're welcome. Thank you. Interconnecting authentically. Yes, absolutely. Okay, connection says Mars conjunct Venus in the 8th house in your natal. Oh, that's really, really interesting. That's a lot of passion when it comes to your relationships. Also, you'll be really, really good at manifesting if you're able to direct the energy. So with 8th house energy and Scorpionic energy, what happens with them is like they have the energy within them, but when they're underdeveloped, they can get emotionally pulled in a different direction because it's water, okay? It's a water house, that 8th house. So it's like if something is upsetting you, or, you know, you're kind of consumed by something else, maybe it's a friend, maybe you had a fight with someone, maybe it's your partner, like whatever it is, because you're being emotionally pulled in this direction, it might be hard for you to manifest this other thing until you balance the energy within yourself. I hope that makes sense. Because Venus in the 8th house, even Mars in the 8th house, like Mars in the 8th house is awesome because it's like, you know, you can really take all of the emotional energy, like the obsession and like being obsessed with your goal and trying to get to wherever you're trying to go, and apply that towards your goal. And then Venus, you indulge in it, and then you can make money through these things. So Venus in the 8th, you can make money through 8th house types of things. So it can be the occult, anything, sex, death, rebirth, joint, finances, taxes, and the occult, talking about these types of things, talking about taboo types of things, finances, being a financial advisor. It's usually other people's money though with the 8th house. So you can make money through all these types of things. Astrology, maybe being a psychologist, these types of things, okay? So that's that energy. But what I will say, I always say for 8th house people, watch out for fast money, okay? Watch out for those people that are trying to sell the Amazon Kindle books and whatever, all these like pyramid schemes and like the Gatorades and all these things, okay? Because you'll just waste time, and you might as well just put that energy towards your own goal is really what that is. Hey, welcome. Yes, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm just going in order, so I will get to everyone. Okay, Willard says, could you please give you a brief synopsis of what I would say is a good focus for your purpose/career? You said you have a Cancer sun, Leo rising, and your North Node. Aries moon, Taurus is your midheaven, and then you have Venus, Pisces, and then Mars and Gemini. Okay, hold on. So Cancer sun, and then you have your Leo rising, and then your North Node is in Leo as well. So you need to be seen. And then you have a Taurus midheaven, so climbing to something, climbing to higher heights. Venus in, you said you have, you have Venus in Cancer. So let me think actually with all of that, because the Cancerian energy is going to make you a little bit more nurturing. So it could be a lot of things. Like honestly, it could even be like teaching. I can see teaching with that energy as well, because Leo rising needs to be seen. But Leo rising, honestly, doesn't matter what they do. Same thing with North Node and Leo, as long as they're on a stage and they're expressing themselves creatively is really what that is. So maybe even making videos. And then you said with your Mars and Gemini, you feel so scattered. Yeah, Mars and Gemini is scattered. That could be like your quote unquote problem area or area that you have to master. So with Mars and Gemini, because it sees things from a lot of perspectives, first of all, you could try to do everything. And then when you're trying to do everything, nothing gets done. Okay, so that's important to understand. And then you also said you have an Aries moon, so you're here to start something, start some sort of new cycle. Is really what that is. It's the Mars and Gemini though. It's like Mars and Gemini also can sometimes have two conflicting belief systems existing at the same time. So I always use the same example for this. It's like you could have the belief system that you have to work hard to, you know, create your goals and manifest and all these things. But you could also have the opposite belief system where it's like, I don't have to work hard, and both can be true. But if you believe both at the same time, nothing's gonna come through, you know what I mean? Because you're at an internal conflict. That's the struggle with Gemini energy. Because Gemini sees things from a lot of perspectives, they can eventually really come to this internal conflict because they can see how this is true and how that is true as well, okay? And then because it's in your Mars, when it comes to like going after something, you know, it could kind of make you a little bit more sitting by the sidelines, or let me try this, but then drop it. Because Gemini is like that, because Gemini wants to start this and start that and start that. But the energy can be used really well in terms of like, you know, you have started this project and you've, you know, gotten it to maybe 80%, and then you start this other project, and then you're still working on this, but it's at 80%. But if everything is at like 20, 30%, that all gets dropped with the Gemini energy. That's the struggle. So that's kind of what you're gonna have to really reel in. So yeah, that's really what it is. Anything that is kind of like nurturing or maybe helping people, and you're being seen, okay, for it. So that's kind of something, you know, that you might be interested in doing, and also getting the gains. And also with the Aries moon, like you know, really, really being number one. Like Aries moon can't really work in a team. They can work in a team if they're delegating the tasks. So Aries energy is really good at like managerial types of roles. Let's say if they're the ones that think of the idea and then they delegate it to everybody else. Because Aries is good at starting, not so good at continuing. So Aries kind of gets like the high of novelty is really what that is. So that's why Aries starts a lot of things, but doesn't necessarily continue with them. So when we go out of Aries into Taurus, then Taurus is actually building. So anything in this realm is really anything. It can manifest many, many different ways. Hey, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yeah. Let's see what else are you guys saying in here. Neptune and Scorpio, hey, how are you doing? Moon, 10th house, conjunct Saturn, 7th house in Taurus. Synastry, please. So your moon is conjuncting Saturn in Taurus. That's karmic. Moon, Saturn conjunctions, it kind of feels like the two people are always resolving like mommy daddy issues through each other. That's how it feels like. I have a video on that on my YouTube channel if you want to learn even more. Hey K10, how are you doing? Okay, clear explanation on the difference between the 4th, 8th, and 12th houses. You don't get it. Okay, good question. So 4th house ruled by Cancer, okay? So here's the thing. All of the houses, like all of the 4th, 8th, and 12th house, they're all intuitive. They're all psychic in their own way. So the 4th house is the beginning. So the 4th house is really important. It's your home. It's your foundations. And you guys have to look at the natal chart as a progression. So if you're stuck at that 4th house and the internal world and the home and the upbringing and the struggles, you know, if there's something that took place there, it's going to be hard for you to progress through the chart, especially to get to that 10th house, which is kind of like the prize if you look at it, right? Because the 10th house, this is in the Placidus tropical system, by the way, okay? The 10th house is the top of your chart. So you can kind of look at it as you're working toward the 10th house, but the 4th house is opposing this. So if you have issues in the 4th house, usually within the home, usually the 4th house is the mother, but if it's not the mother, you can look at it as the dominant feminine role in your life. And then in turn, it'll be all of the people who are operating out of the feminine energy in your life. So it could be through your friends, it can be through your partners, etc. Okay. So 4th house is that Cancerian energy. It's your foundation, it's the home. 4th house energy, if you have an abundance of it, there's karma to resolve around the home. And all of these things are generational houses in a way as well, where you're clearing generational things. So the abundance of 4th house energy, let's say you have a stellium in the 4th house in your natal chart. Now, obviously it depends what planets are in there, but usually it's opposing your 10th house. So it's like you really have to clear a lot of things that may have taken place within the home, the karmas, and these types of things, okay? So that's the 4th house. 8th house, ruled by Scorpio, okay? So that 8th house energy is everything that is hidden, okay? It's everything that is beneath the surface. It's operating through energy. It's all things to do with energy work, the energy behind something. What does someone actually mean? Like I have a bunch of 8th house videos on my YouTube channel. If you guys are interested, it's in my 8th house / Scorpio playlist, okay? There's a bunch of playlists if you guys are new here on my channel. So you guys can go through the playlists and see what catches your attention if there's anything that you guys want to learn more about. So that's what the 8th house is. It's anything that's hidden. It's anything that's beneath the surface. So if you have an abundance of 8th house energy, usually what happens with these people is they're usually uncovering something that has taken place within the home, okay? Or within the family line. And usually it's some sort of secret, covert type of thing. It could be a covert type of pattern. It could be anything to do with like emotions, anything to do with like emotional neglect. It's usually covert though, okay? So it's really, really hard to catch with the 8th house. It could be something like maybe everyone was codependent, you know, in the family line, and you're the one that comes through and is like, no, I'm not going to be codependent. Or it could be like, maybe there was like emotional manipulation and you're the one that comes through and catches that, right? Because it's usually covert, it's hidden. It's something that might be hard to pinpoint with the 8th house. Now, also the 8th house deals with addictions. It also deals with sexuality as well. So there's always something happening with these things. Now, people have a lot of 8th house energy, also have a lot of sexual energy as well. And keep in mind, sexual energy is also healing energy, and it's also your psychic energy and your creative energy as well, okay? So all these energies are connected. So what happens with these people is usually in the earlier part of their life, there's some sort of wounding, okay, that takes place with the 8th house, where it's like they become closed off, or maybe they become emotionally unavailable themselves, or maybe they were just overloaded, okay? I heard the best example from someone once. Now, I don't remember what they said for all the houses in terms of like the water energy, but for the 8th house, they basically said like the 8th house, the way that it feels like, and Scorpio energy, it's like, it's kind of like when you're at the bottom of like a pool, you know, let's say you're playing like games with your friends when you were younger and you guys are like trying to stay underwater, whoever can stay underwater the longest or whatever, right? So like the vibe with the 8th house is like you're under there and all of this water is around you, right? So it gets overwhelming. So that's why a lot of the time 8th house people, if they don't resolve their emotions, and then on top of that, other people's emotions that they may have internalized, well, in that case, they just shut off completely, okay? So I've seen a lot of sometimes 8th house people who are like emotionally absent completely, or maybe there's something traumatic that took place as well that makes them emotionally absent or unavailable, okay? So that's the 8th house, hidden, okay? Everything is hidden. Everything is beneath the surface, and that's why they're always seeking as well. There's so much more to say, okay? But that's the overall idea for the 8th house. And then the 12th house, now the 12th house is like full blown in the crown, okay? So the 12th house is ruled by Pisces, okay? And we can also look at the 12th house as that final house, the accumulation of all the energies. So with the 12th house, there's so much going on here as well. So all of these houses are going to be psychic and intuitive in their own way. They're all probably going to be clairsentient, so very feeling based, feeling emotions, feeling other people's stuff. The 12th house is usually karmic in a sense where it's connected to past lives. It's connected to things that you're closing out in this lifetime as well. Karmas, I've noticed that the 12th house also tends to travel within family lines as well. So within your family line, like let's say you're a 12th house person, there's probably other family members that are also 12th house people, because sometimes the people do travel together to maybe clear out certain things, okay? Also, the 12th house is all about the crown chakra in the sense where it's like, you know, I was saying this earlier also, that would apply more so for like Scorpionic 8th house energy, but it's like there's different types of you going into the crown, right? Until you are able to actually go into the crown, to go into like that divine version of getting in tune with the psychic gifts and abilities. So what happens is like all these people, 4th house, 8th house, and 12th house people are going to be intuitive in one way, shape, or form. But it's like, especially the 8th house, because the 8th house does deal with trauma a lot of the time, and then the 12th house also deals with the trauma in its own way as well. What happens with these people is like they tend to, when you're underdeveloped and your psychic gifts come online, you go into the lower chakras, right? So you go more into like the fear aspect of things. So sometimes you can go into like paranoias and like things that are behind the scenes, and like, you know, certain fears that you might have, or like subconscious fears and these types of things, okay? So after you clear all of that and transmute all of that, and what I will say usually is like, it's not even your own stuff, especially if you're 12th house, 8th house, like it's usually other people's stuff that you have internalized as your own because you're energetically open. So the way that I see these houses is like, you want to learn how to close your aura, right? So when you're younger and, you know, you're just like oblivious to life and you're just having a good time, the way that I see it is like, this is just my own observation. I kind of see it like your solar plexus doesn't fully land and form within your body until your Saturn return. So you're energetically open. So you're more, you know, susceptible to energies and picking up on other people's things and maybe internalizing it as your own. And then you're also more unaware. And then also the prefrontal cortex hasn't developed in your brain either. I'm not a psychologist, I always say that, but that's interesting that it aligns with the Saturn return, right? So the 12th house depends where you have it, right? Because you're closing out that particular planet's cycle. And then you also carry over certain things from that particular planet into this lifetime as well. So it could be certain gifts. And then also because it is that Neptunian Piscean energy, it's like you go into the crown in that particular area. I hope that makes sense. So like, let's say you have Jupiter in the 12th. Well, maybe ways of making money for you are things that you've already mastered maybe, but you weren't able to express in a past life. You come through in this lifetime to close out that cycle. I hope that makes sense. So that's the whole thing here, okay? So they're all psychic and intuitive in their own way, and especially the 8th house, 12th house, because those are the hidden houses more so. Like the 12th house is also about the collective unconscious, and then people always freak out about the 12th house. But usually the ones that are freaking out about the 12th house are the ones that don't understand the psychic worlds and then the psychic realms, okay? Because all these houses are psychic. And for you to go into like the divine version of the psychic gifts and abilities, you have to heal the lower chakra wounds and then closing up the aura and like, you know, deprogramming, like taking off all of these energies off of you, because all these houses merge. So with all that being said, you know, you might struggle with boundaries, for example, with all of these houses. 4th house is super abandoned. So because the 4th house is the house of the family, these people are always going to be looking for a family, okay? So, you know, sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes it's holding you back in life, right? Like, let's say you started a job and maybe that job doesn't serve you anymore. Like, let's say you work there for X amount of years and it's like, maybe you want to do something different, but maybe you have a family feel going on with like your colleagues and maybe you didn't have that when you were growing up. Well, that could now be holding you back because now that's connected to the abandonment wound, okay? Also depends where you have 4th house, because 4th house people could also sometimes maybe have orphan past lives and these types of things. But what I will say about past lives and all these things is see if you can resolve the issue in this current lifetime first. Like, see if it's something that happened when you were younger, or if it's within the family line or like the ancestral line, right? If you can't find your answer there, then look at your past lives, okay? So that's a brief analysis. I know there's always a theme. I always say that. I love it. It's like, it makes sense. It's like all the people that gather together are on the same frequency. I always think about that. Like, even when I see people, let's say I see the same people all the time, like I always think to myself, and I'm like, there's something here that's within our mutual frequency, right? Like, clearly, like, I think people have more in common than they think. And, you know, when you see someone all the time, like, especially if you're like bumping into them, like, you know, there's something so there where it's like you're bumping into this person for a reason, right? Oh, good. I'm glad that that resonated. Yay. I mean, I have so much more that I can say. I could probably make like an hour-long video going through all of the houses. Maybe I should make that on my, or maybe I should put that on my list. Hey, Jupiter Pisces listens. You said, oh yes, I'm glad. And you said 12 a.m. in SA. Are you in South Africa? If you're still in the live, let me know. You said when you read your chart, all you see is unstableness, aggressiveness. How do you change this? What is bringing upon that energy? You said you thought 8th house represented sex. It does. So in terms of sex and sexuality, you can look at the 5th house and you can look at the 8th house, okay? The 8th house is intimacy and it's the merging of energy. So it's kind of like that next level of sexuality, okay? The 5th house is dating and fun and these types of things. So absolutely. You said you were listening to 12th house. You have Uranus, Juno, Neptune in the 12th house in Capricorn, stellium in Scorpio. You have Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde, Sun, Ceres, Pluto, and midheaven. And then you said, help, what would you like to know about all of that? So you said you basically have a 12th house stellium, and then you have a stellium in Scorpio. You have Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde. Venus retrograde, you're resolving romantic relationships in this lifetime. Mercury retrograde is interesting because Mercury retrograde in a natal chart is basically you're here to deliver some sort of message, but you struggle in that exact area at the same time, okay? So you guys will notice, if you guys are ever trying to figure out what is my life purpose, it's usually the area that you're struggling in. That's just the nature of this plane. It's like, I find the plane very Saturnian. I always say this, okay? It's very Saturnian down here. So it's like, it's always kind of knocking you down, you know? It's like, especially when you're trying to do something, it's gonna knock you down. So when you guys are struggling in a particular area, it's usually connected to your life purpose. Maybe you're meant to overcome that and then help other people. So Mercury retrograde people are basically here to deliver some sort of message. But when you're younger, you could struggle to speak, right? Or to express your thoughts. Or maybe you're more so internalized, like maybe you're more so an introvert, right? So it could be this, because all of the retrograde energies are more so internalized versus externalized. So you have to work harder to pull the energy out. But it's like at the same time within you, there could be this like desperate desire, right? To be heard. And I don't mean desperate in like a negative way. It's just like, you know, burning desire. Like I really want people to hear me. Like I really want, you know, this message to come across, but you could struggle in that area at the same time, okay? And then 12th house people. So 12th house people, what's interesting with them, I mean, so many things. I have so many videos. So I have an 8th house playlist, and then I have a 12th house playlist for those of you who are interested in learning more about the 8th and the 12th houses, because there's just so much to say. And then I always have something new coming through, okay? So 12th house people are really interesting because, you know, especially in the earlier part of your life, you might feel like you're not seen. Like you literally might feel like it's interesting because the energy is a little bit out of body and the energy is more so in like the psychic realms. When you're younger, like, you know, it's like a chicken and the egg thing. So maybe the parents were working all the time, for example, and you were just in your crown as a kid all the time, or you were in your imagination. So it's like, it's this chicken and the egg where it's like, does it happen because the energy's there, or like because the energy's there, does that end up like playing out in your reality? I don't know, right? But you'll notice with 12th house people, like let's say you're in a group of friends, you could like be saying something and you know, you have an idea to do something and nobody hears you. And then like 5 minutes later, somebody else says it and everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's such a great idea. And you're like, but I said it 5 minutes ago, okay? So that's the 12th house energy. So what happens then with 12th house people is because they spend so much time in this like invisibilized energy, then later on they might spend more time uplifting other people and like kind of, you know, helping other people be seen, if that makes sense. But at the same time, it's like you still want to be seen. Do you know what I mean? So honoring that, I guess. Hey everyone, welcome. You're welcome. I'm just going in order. How are you guys doing? Happy New Year. Leo sun, Capricorn moon, Leo rising. Oh, that is hustle, 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 and being seen. I am curious though to know, is your sun in the 12th house or is it in the first house? You said, so Tanya said you're a 12th house moon and 12th house Saturn. And then you have Mars in Cancer, 11th house opposing your Venus, sun in the 5th house. Yeah, Mars in Cancer, like I can't say it's an aggressive energy. It can be passive aggressive. Yes, it can have explosions. And unfortunately, like when it's underdeveloped, it can usually like suppress a lot of its anger and then explode and then cry and not actually get the message across. So Mars in Cancer basically has to work on communication or expressing their needs more or expressing how they feel more, or when they're upset, expressing it. If you can't express it, at least write it down so it's like out of your system. And then 12th house moon and 12th house Saturn. So moon conjunct Saturn. I mean, I can't say that that's overly aggressive if that's what you were saying earlier up there. Let's see, MD Sauce Boss, how are you doing? You said, hey, how are you? And then you said, what can I tell you about your second house stellium and Capricorn? You've got moon, Neptune, and Uranus. Okay, moon, conjunct Neptune, conjunctions in the natal chart, you all. Definitely watch out for substances and addictions, okay? Because this energy is always going to be curious to be out of body. What does it feel like? And then go into escapism, okay? So that's something to watch out for that energy. It's not going to manifest for everybody. It doesn't mean you're going to go into addiction. It just means basically you have the tendency to escape, okay? Now, with that being said, when you're escaping, you can also go into the higher realms, right? So if you learn to channel your energy into like the psychic realms, then you can also be really creative. So then that particular conjunction can also make you super, super creative. And then Uranus in there, it's gonna be something very, very unique. So yes, it is in Capricorn, but it basically has this Piscean influence to it where it's like, you know, you could be very creative, let's say at music or any type of art, really. It could be writing, it could be dancing, it could be poetry, all these things, but it's going to be something unique. So it kind of seems like you're bringing through something unique, okay, in terms of something that's going to bring you money even, right? Because it's in that second house. And then Capricorn, it's good to have Capricorn in there because Capricorn is going to work. But Capricorn struggles because it's like the earlier part of your life is all hustle, right? So it's usually, it's hard to say in traditional astrology because it is Saturn. They do say it's the second half of your life, which is after 35. I feel like the frequency of the planet is higher. So because things are happening faster, you know, people are healing more, people are becoming more aware, we're kind of going into the higher vibration. So it could be sooner, but still, you still have to work towards something when it comes to Capricorn energy, okay? But still, it's in that creative realm. So really, really taking the time to be in the crown, right? Where it's like you're tapping into all these higher realms and ideas, but not get stuck up there, if that makes sense, where it's like you're just in your imagination, like figuring out how you can ground it basically and bring it into this physical reality. Okay, yes, K10, I will add that to my list. That's going to be later, but for sure I will add it to my list. Let's see what else you guys seeing here. You say I have Scorpio Mars in the 4th house. Scorpio Mars is good, but the 4th house is a little bit of a struggle. You're welcome. Yay, oh my gosh, I'm glad that it resonated. B89 says, what does it mean when you have a lot of planets that are the same degrees in parts of your chart? Let's see what else are you guys saying in here. You said Pisces moon square Saturn in Gemini in the 3rd house. So your Pisces moon is in the 12th and then you have it squaring your Saturn. That's interesting. That's friction between the parents first and foremost. When you were growing up, once again, moon, mother, Saturn, father. It's squaring, okay? Mother says do it like this, father says we're gonna do it like that. And then in turn, you could struggle with your masculine, feminine energy within, okay? So everything that happens affects us, okay? So when you're looking at the mother, then you're gonna look at how does that reflect in terms of your own feminine energy within. If you're looking at the father, how does that reflect in terms of your own masculine energy within? If the parents' roles are reversed, well then you also see how that affects your own internal masculine, feminine energy within as well, okay? So Pisces moon is wanting to be dreamy, right? Pisces moon is like, oh my gosh, like we can do it like this and it'll be so great and everything is like all like rainbows and butterflies, right? With that Pisces moon. You do have it in the 12th house. 12th house moon is usually karma with the mother, okay? That you're clearing once again in this lifetime, like it's carried over into this lifetime. And 12th house, once again, it's hidden, right? It's unseen. So, and you have Pisces moon. It's interesting. Pisces moon can go two ways. Like, these people can either have like a very loving upbringing, like very much unconditional love, like to the point of you being smothered, okay? Or it can go on the opposite because, you know, all the signs have the positive and the negative aspects to them. So It could go into the shadow of Pisces as well, okay? Saturn in Gemini, third house. So the area that's restricted for you is that third house. So it's the mind, maybe it's the expression, you know, maybe you struggle to fully express how you feel about something when you have Saturn in the third house. It could be learning, like sometimes you could struggle with learning when you have Saturn in the third house when you're younger, absolutely. What else with Saturn in the third house? Siblings also, maybe there's like conflict with the siblings, or maybe there was like triangulation I'm just picking up on more so psychically. So these are a few things that can take place. A man with Juno and Virgo in the 7th house, what does that mean for relationships? I mean, honestly, here's the thing, like Juno, it's an asteroid, right? There's so many more things in a natal chart that are going to tell you more about the person than Juno. Let's see what else you guys saying in here. How do you deal with a Scorpio stellium? How do you deal with a Scorpio stellium with a Taurus rising? Taurus rising, people are really interesting. I see them like very successful, okay? A lot of them end up in a lot of like roles where they're building, like they're hardworking. That's what's good with Taurus rising people. Like they're gonna actually put in the work to get the wealth, to get those like material things that they're seeking. Okay, so that's something that's really positive about Taurus rising. And they're like slow and steady wins the race. I'm slowly going to get to my goal. One foot in front of the other. All these things. Okay, so that's Taurus rising. Scorpio stellium. Now, here's the thing. Okay, Scorpio deals with a lot of shadows. Okay, so Scorpio has to integrate a lot of shadow traits is really what that is. So like Taurus rising might be like, okay, let's work really hard toward this thing and make this plan. And then Scorpio energy is just going to come through and going to be like, you don't have to work hard. You know, you can do it this way. You can get it this fast way, right? Because Scorpio is always trying to trick the energy. And then that's why Scorpio is sometimes connected to karma, because it's that 8th house energy, where it's like, because it's constantly trying to trick and manipulate the energy of the plane, it actually like ironically makes things longer for itself, right? Because then it has to spend more time undoing the tricks that it's trying to do, you know what I mean? Rather than just taking like, you know, that path of, I guess, least resistance in a way, right? So it's really, really interesting. So Scorpio has a lot to integrate. And also what I was saying earlier in terms of like goals, because Taurus is trying to go toward a goal, right? It's like, this is my goal. This is how I'm going to do it. And then Scorpio, again, comes through behind the shadows where it's like, well, you don't have to work as hard, which, you know, it's interesting with all of the water houses and signs. It's like every belief that they have is true in the higher planes, right? But down here, we're restricted by Saturn is what it is, okay? We're restricted by Saturn and we're restricted by karma and time. So the things that get rewarded down here are when you put in a lot of effort into something or you're constantly working toward that thing. So when Scorpio is able to streamline the energy towards something and is going towards something positive and is kind of following the rules of the plane instead of trying to manipulate them, then it's like all aligning for Scorpio, right? But it takes some time. It's that pendulum swing that I was telling you guys about. You said so true about the 12th house. You're going to say something, then months later people repeat it to you. Yeah, exactly. That's the struggle with the 12th house. It's interesting because it's like, that's part of the 11th house's karma as well. And then we go out of the 11th into the 12th. So 11th house, Aquarius energy, because it used to be ruled by Saturn, right? You know, what they're mastering is the time to pitch their ideas, right? When are they going to pitch it? Because a lot of the time they're ahead of the time. And when they come up with it, the collective's not there yet. Or at least you need to have a certain like part of the collective to be there, right? For it to pick up traction and speed. But then the 12th house is like, it's that invisibilized energy, right? Where it's like people just don't hear it. Like it just goes over their head. Like completely like, they're like, what? Chiron in Gemini, retrograde 9th house affects a person. Okay, so wherever you guys have Chiron, it's the area that you guys are healing through in this particular lifetime, okay? So Chiron in Gemini, you're healing through speech and you're healing through expression. So what I find with Gemini energy is it's interesting because it is the sign of the speaking and communicating, they actually struggle with exactly this. So this is the thing with all the signs, what I've noticed at least, okay? You know, whatever that sign means, a lot of the time, people who have that sign, they struggle with that exact thing. And I don't know why this is. Maybe it's because this plane operates in irony, or maybe it's just like the shadows are stronger when you're unaware of them. I don't know, right? But this is usually what tends to happen until you kind of have the awareness, reel it in, and then, you know, try to see how you can get that energy to benefit you, right? When you have retrograde energy, right, and the Chiron, you're basically, in a way, I don't want to say repeating, even though I want to say repeating, but it's not that you're repeating the lesson, but in a way it is this. Like retrograde energy, the way that I see it in a natal chart is like, it's something that's not completed from a past life, right? Like it's something that it's different from the 12th house. Like the 12th house is similar where it's like you're completing it again in this lifetime, but retrograde, the only way I can explain retrogrades in a chart is like on a soul level, it's like you're over it. Like you've done it so many times and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to do it again. Like again, I have to do it. Like the only example or metaphor I can give you guys is like, you know, when you do those like quizzes for work and you have to go through all the modules, and then, you know, for the modules, when you finish them, you have to get like 75% to pass, and there's maybe like 10 questions. And then every time you get one question wrong, and then by the time, you know, you're at the end, you're like, oh my gosh, like how many more times do I have to do this? Like that's retrograde. Okay, that's how it feels like to me. So Chiron retrograde, okay, and it's in the 9th house for you. Basically, like you're finishing this again, right? Like it's something that's carried over and like on a soul level, and it's also internalized, right? So you might have to work harder to pull it out or become aware of it. That's kind of like the overall idea, okay? 9th house is the higher mind, higher learning. It's going to be anything to do with like freedom and travel and philosophies. So you're healing through all these things. So when you're learning about maybe different religions or like different philosophies and like mysticism and then maybe even astrology, like that's all very healing for you. So wherever you guys have Chiron in your natal chart, you're healing through that exact area. Let's see what else are you guys saying in here. You said, oh my God, thank you, you're welcome. You said you've always had issues around communication and childhood trauma, around being allowed, and you always wrote highly psychic. It makes sense. Yeah, so here's the thing. It's like on this earth plane, and I'm glad that we're slowly moving out of this, but it's like up until this point in time, it's such an amazing time because back in the day, anyone who was psychic or intuitive wasn't allowed to speak, right? Or they were shut down, or they were made to feel a certain type of way about like their intuitions. Like people wouldn't believe them, right? So it's like, because of that, a lot of people got cut off from their intuition. They went more so into the logic, right? But it's like the logic isn't going to lead you to where your intuitions are going to lead you, because it's like, you know, you really have to learn how to feel things within your body, and the intuitive muscle usually doesn't actually make sense, right? And that's kind of like when you're trying to train yourself and like starting to really get more in tune with your psychic gifts and abilities, you have to learn how to really listen to that heart space and that heart resonance, as corny as it is, right? But it really is this. So it's like, this is kind of what the collective is relearning, right? Like they're getting in tune with their intuition and like that part of life that doesn't necessarily make sense, because the mind, right, which is the ego most of the time, is going to be like, no, do it this way because it's like this and it makes sense to do it that way. But then the intuition might do it all backwards, right? And maybe the intuitive aspect of it is going to get you to your goal faster, because it's like at the end of the day, like I feel like we all know on an intuitive level what we're meant to do, right? Like we do seek the confirmation for that, and astrology is great for that. Like it confirms what we're already thinking and feeling inside, right? But the more we get in tune with our intuition, like we won't need these things anymore. But that's also connected to just like going into the higher vibrations as well. Let's see, you've been feeling effed up more since this past eclipse cycle, this past fall season. Depends to see what's going on with your placements. What I will say is this past Mercury retrograde was so intense. So literally since the winter solstice, the 21st, there was like a vortex. Like that's what it felt like to me. And I was literally counting down until January 1st. I was just like done with 2023 overall. I'm like, let's get out of this energy. I'm finished. I also wanted to be like Pluto in Aquarius faster. Like I'm done with Pluto in retrograde, or sorry, Pluto in Capricorn. Like it's just been energetically just like too much. You know what I mean? Like Pluto in Aquarius is just like a completely different vibe. So yes, it's been intense, and it's nice because it's like now Mercury retrograde is ending yesterday, I believe. Like it went direct, but we still have that post shadow, but still like it's lighter energetically. And then it's interesting because around that time, it's always like the holiday Christmas season. So it's like everyone's energetically intense. Like it's really, really interesting to see. And then it's like, if you're clairsentient, you're picking up on the collective, right? So like whatever the collective's going through, the clairsentient person feels it. Now, what I learned from somebody else that I really liked, they basically said for like clairsentient people, or people who are like more feelers or just like more psychic in this way, because like, I don't know what the percentage is. I'll just give you guys a random number. Like, let's say it's like 80% of the collective. Let's say 80% of the collective isn't in tune with their emotions, and they're not in tune with their shadows, and they're not in tune with anything really. They're just like going about their life like on autopilot. So for them, like when their shadows come up, they're not aware, right? And then the clairsentient person picks up on that, right? So it's like a lot of the time, like people who are more energetically sensitive, I guess you can say, especially if you're not grounded, like you feel tired and you feel drained, right? Because of this whole dynamic that's going on. But what's nice is like now people are starting to heal more, and they're more open to this world, and they're more open to learning about themselves and self-awareness and all these things. So it's going to be actually easier for the people who are clairsentient, because they're not going to pick up on as much, because these people are going to start to work through their things. I hope that makes sense. Oh, thank you, Kelly. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that my videos resonate. Yes, welcome to everyone joining and Happy New Year. I'm just going in order, so I will get to everyone at the bottom. Hey, Texas Desert Rose, I hope you're still on the live. You said you're a Capricorn Sun, Leo Rising, Gemini Moon, and then you said you live in Okinawa, and then it has progressed your angular house planets to almost 0. You feel like you have a new lease on life. That's awesome. You're welcome. You said resonating for house Scorpio, Saturn, Pluto, 8th house, Pisces, Mars, Venus, so much work to do. Yeah, there's so much work to do. That's the thing. So it's like you can either choose to do the work or it just continues, right? So the thing is, like, in terms of inner work, like, yeah, it's not fun. And like, sometimes you're going to want to go scream in a forest or like a pillow or like whatever, but at least then it's out of your system. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. What I learned once and what I really liked was like, you know, animals, when they go through something traumatic or something like intense energetically, like they just shake and they like shake it all out of their system and then they just like move on with their day, right? Humans, I don't know why they stopped doing that, but they don't do anything like that, right? So they just like internalize, and who knows, maybe it's because of like the hamster wheel and just like being on go, go, go all the time, or survival mode, like it's all these things, right? So because of this, right, like people internalize a lot of things, and then the older that you get, right, the more you repeat the patterns, and there's just like so much to just like clear, right? But when you clear it and when you purge it and when you release it, thanks so much for the likes, you guys. When you release it and you purge it, your life becomes easier. I think it's more worth it, even though it's not fun. Like when you're in the process, yeah, it's not fun. And no one really talks about that part of the journey. Like they're like vibe high and go into the high vibrations. And you know what's really interesting? Actually, something that I've been thinking about lately is like, you know how a lot of people, like in terms of the new age, like in terms of everything, okay, you all, it's really important to learn to discern and to see what's true and what's not true, because anytime there's a movement, there's always like 2 truths and then a lie, right? So there's always like the 2 things or 3 things rather that are like all intermingled with each other, right? But what I've been thinking about is like, I find it interesting when people talk about the new age or anything, right? They start to call it demonic or like dark. But what's interesting to me is like, you know, when people talk about raising their frequency, or anything of the sort, right? It's like when you go into a higher frequency yourself, right? You're going to the higher frequency, you know, the shadow comes to the surface, right? That's just how it works. That's why people who have a lot of light trigger other people, right? They bring their shadows to the surface. And it's like, I find it interesting when people call certain things demonic, because it's just like, to me, it's like, it's actually your own demons that are coming to the surface that need to be cleared. I don't know. I hope that makes sense, right? So that's kind of how it works in terms of like the healing journey. You go up a little and then things come through to purge, right? And then it's like, you kind of go through this process until you neutralize is really what that is. And then you're going to go through the pendulum, right? You're going to go through this extreme and then you're going to go through that extreme. Like let's say, for example, like let's say you're healing attachment styles, right? Again, I'm not a psychologist, just observations, right? So let's say you're healing attachment styles. You might go through the extremities of the attachment styles, right? So like, let's say you're like really codependent, right? So you might be in this and then, you know, you're clearing that and maybe you realize, oh my gosh, you know, I'm codependent. And then you go into the other extreme where maybe now you're completely avoidant and detached, right? So now you're in the other extreme, and then eventually you might come somewhere in the middle where you've now neutralized and healed this aspect of yourself within yourself, right? So that's for everything. So it's like, let's say you struggle with the throat chakra, right? And speaking, you might go through that phase of life when you're younger and you don't express, and you know, you're like afraid to speak and speak your mind and whatever it is, like so many reasons, right? So you go through that phase, but then you go into the other extreme when you're healing, where you realize, right, that you've been like suppressed and you haven't been able to express. And then you go into the extreme where it's like, now you say everything, right? Or like anytime somebody says something that like upsets you, maybe you say it right away. And this is a purge, right? So you purge this way until you come into the middle and you neutralize the energy within, right? So that's kind of how it works. Hey everyone, how are you guys doing? Hey Angie, oh my gosh, how are you? Harmonic chart, I'm not sure. Let's see, I'm just going back up to see what else you guys are saying in here. You said as a Gemini rising, you need that simplified version of knowledge. You're welcome. You said Venus in the 12th house mean all relationships are karmic. Yes. You notice people come and then suddenly all of the relationships vanish. Yes. Venus in the 12th house is all interpersonal relationships are karmic. But here's the thing. This is what I'm going to say, okay? Everything is karmic. Like everything in our life is karmic, right? But if you feel an intensity, that's an energy that's being neutralized. I hope that makes sense, right? So like, let's say you feel an intense pull to someone or whatever, right? There's something there that's being neutralized between the two people. So Maybe there's something within their energy field that you're meant to learn, or, you know, they're meant to learn from you. Like we're always learning from each other, right? And neutralizing the energies within. So for 12th house people, like, yes, it's karmic, but it's also healing in a way, because the 12th house is also the healing house, right? So it's like through relationships, you're healing something. Maybe you're healing an aspect of yourself. Maybe you're healing an attachment style thing, like whatever it is, right? So that's kind of how it works. You're welcome. You said you agree with the 12th house. You felt invisible as a child. It made you very well aware of people. Yes. 12th house stellium. Oh my gosh, there's so many 12th house people in the house. Welcome to all the 12th house people. Okay, I have a video, actually not just one. I have a whole playlist on the 12th house. So if you guys are interested in learning more, check out my 12th house / Pisces playlist. It's the 12th house stellium. Moon, Saturn, Uranus in Sag. Sun is in the 5th house in Taurus. Mercury and Mars in Gemini, and Venus and Jupiter in Aries, Capricorn ascendant. It's a lot. Yeah, 12th house energy is intense because it's very karmic. You've got Moon, Saturn, so that's like the mother-father dynamic that you're clearing in this lifetime, probably from a past life. Sun in the 5th house, here to express creatively is really what that is. And the 12th house is karmic. Okay? Everything is karmic, but the 12th house especially. Okay, so it's really interesting. Something that I was thinking about today actually was the whole theme of codependency, but I was thinking about it in terms of the whole concept of quote unquote twin flames, right? So one of the biggest things that this collective is meant to clear and integrate is codependency, okay? And the thing is, you know, you can be codependent on a person in a relationship, but you can also be energetically codependent on a person or an idea, right? So if you start going into your mind and you start thinking about something and you're like obsessing, like that is a form of codependency. Or you can be like, it doesn't have to be a person, it can be any form of idea, right? So I find that interesting because that's something like that's being transmuted through the collective overall. And it's interesting because the whole twin flame concept and like twin flame universe, like all these things have just been like blowing up in like the last year. But really what it is, it's like the whole concept of codependency being cleared. So what's interesting is like people who are 12th house people, right? Like they struggle with codependency, but like psychic codependency, if that makes sense. So like going into the crown and like escaping through the mind. So it's like really anchoring things down into the physical reality, and being grounded actually is what can really, really help. You said, how does the neutralized pendulum state feel after doing the inner work? You're not affected by anything really anymore. And even if you are, then you kind of go through that whole process all over again, right? So this is kind of how like the whole, I don't know, this is the way that I see the healing journey, right? So it's like when you're younger or more unaware or whatever it is, right? Everything feels so intense, right? I mean, if you're feeling the feelings, at least. Most people don't feel their feelings, but if you feel the feelings, everything feels intense, right? It's like everything's happening and like maybe you're triggered, maybe you're upset, whatever it is, right? And it's like the way that I see healing is like you have to get to the root of the issue, right? So sometimes it's like someone just has to say a word for you to realize what it is. It's this, right? Just now I was talking about codependency, right? Maybe it's that, right? So you realize what the issue is, and now you might have a better understanding of like why you react in a certain way when a certain situation comes up, right? So then what you have to do is to unlearn that. Again, this is just my own opinion. I'm not a psychologist or anything like that. This is just how I have done it, I guess. It's like to unlearn that is basically like you have to not react in the way that you would usually react, right? So like, let's say maybe you're someone, because you know how people say there's all the 4 things, like there's fight, flight, fawn, and then another one, right? So let's say in situations, maybe your instant reaction is always to fight with people or argue with them, right? Whatever. Maybe that's your instant reaction in a situation. Well, in the future, maybe don't argue, right? Maybe, you know, like wait, or maybe wait until everything has neutralized to say something like, hey, this upset me, this bothered me, instead of like being in your face, right? So it's things like this, right? And then the more you do it, the more you train yourself. And then you can start to catch yourself in these shadow traits. And I made the chakra videos, right? Because I wanted to kind of like draw the attention to like the main collective wounds that I've observed that exist in the collective, right? The abandonment wound is a big one. Obviously survival mode, like these are things that have again been imposed on us as a collective, right? What else is there? Struggling to speak, anything to do with like sexuality, like all these things, right? All these lower chakra wounds, the heart chakra, grief even, right? So when you get to that neutralized point, you're literally unbothered. Like it doesn't, something that maybe affected you once doesn't affect you more. And then also it's like, I don't think you'll ever be quote unquote fully healed. I think that eventually what happens is like you just get to the point where you're better equipped and things don't affect you as much. So again, when you're younger, it's like everything seems like such a big deal, right? Let's say you fail a test and you've never failed anything before. You're like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. But it's like, let's say you did fail that test and now you've seen that it's not that big of a deal, well, now it doesn't affect you anymore, right? It's like, okay, we're gonna get through it, we're gonna get to the, you know, next phase, like whatever it is, right? So that's kind of how I see it, like when you're neutralized in the middle somewhere. And, you know, people are always our mirrors, right? So they're always going to show us the aspect of ourselves that is still in need of healing, is really what that is. Like someone can come into your life and they're going to show you, like maybe they're bringing up some sort of reaction out of you, right? And it's like you really have to explore and be like, why do I have this reaction to this person or whatever it is? And eventually, again, when it's neutralized, it's neutral, right? Like you don't have these reactions anymore. It's really what that is. Let's see what else you guys think here. You said, yeah, many people get codependent on leaders, teachers, gurus instead of taking the knowledge and applying it and moving on. Yes, I'm so happy that you're saying that, because that is another thing that is being purged in the collective, okay? That is another thing, because we're coming out of that, okay? We're coming out of the whole guru and someone leading you. Like that is unhealed, right? Because it's connected to a few things, right? Like it's people putting other people on a pedestal. Like society has been built this way overall, if you think about it, like in that pyramid hierarchical structure, right? There's that. But then there's also like sometimes not wanting to take responsibility for yourself, or like wanting someone to tell you what to do or how to do it, and like, you know, wanting to be led and not wanting to lead, and not wanting, it's usually really connected to responsibility. And like if you struggle with taking responsibility, well then you have to explore that, right? Like where does that come from? Well, sometimes maybe you had too much responsibility when you were a kid, let's say, or maybe, I don't know, like the parents would get upset with you when you did something, so now you don't want other people to get upset with you. Like whatever it is, you really have to explore. It can be so many different reasons, right? But that paradigm we're moving away from as well. I'm so glad that you brought that up. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the people joining. Thank you guys for your questions. I'm just going in order. Let me just go back up and see what else you guys saying in here. Moon, Taurus, 8th house opposite. Venus in Scorpio, 2nd house, meaning Moon in Taurus. So your Moon is in Taurus and it's opposite the Venus. Well, your Moon is going to be a little bit more grounded when it comes to its approach, right? Your inner world. And then Venus and Scorpio could be a little bit more possessive. When you have an opposition, the energies are pulling you on the two opposite directions, right? Venus and Scorpio is a little bit of a struggle, but it's interesting because then you have your Moon in the 8th house, which is the undertone of like having a Moon in Scorpio, and then you have your Venus in the 2nd house, which is kind of like the undertone of having a Taurus energy in there as well. So yes, it's pulling you in opposite directions, but at the same time, there's almost like this like balance in there. It doesn't feel energetically too much being pulled, right? But usually oppositions are like, one energy is wanting you to do this, the other energy is wanting you to do that. Venus and Scorpio is a struggle, but what I will say, like all of this is money related for you, right? So for you on like that emotional level, like it's fulfilling to have nice things and a house maybe, or maybe 2 houses and a car and like this type of car, like that's Moon and Taurus, right? Moon and Taurus wants the nice things, they want to enjoy. The thing is, Venus and Scorpio can maybe go about it in a little bit of like a shady way. I will say that, like Scorpio struggles with this, right? Like Scorpio struggles with this energy where it's just like, you know, they, again, want to cut corners, right? When they're unhealed, I would say, or just like maybe in their lower versions. But when you kind of apply that Scorpionic energy, right, in combination with the Taurus, and you're maybe working towards something and you've created a goal and you're obsessed about that thing, right? Well, then you'll bring it through. Venus and Scorpio can be obsessive in relationships, and you can also attract obsessive people as well. You said that's absolutely a responsibility. Well said. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's the same thing. I said this in one of my, recent videos. I think it was a heart chakra video, okay? I was talking about when people say Archangel Michael said this and this Archangel said that. Like, I just don't understand why people can't just say that it's their own opinion. Like, why does there have to be a third party? You know what I mean? It's also connected to responsibility, and that's another one of the wounds in the collective, not wanting to take responsibility for whatever reason, right? Like, a lot of things are like, what is it, like ancestral? Like back in the day, like, you know, the biggest form of like, what's the word, like punishment, I guess you can say, was like, you know, making someone a laughing stock, I guess, in front of like the whole tribe and group, right? So it's like humans have that underlying fear of not fitting with the group, right? Being ostracized from the group or like the community, right? So because that fear is there, and this is why it's collective, you know what I mean? It's a collective wound. It's not something that, you know, happened now. It's just how humans are, right? But it's like when you master these things, well, then you're not going to be affected anymore, because it's like you either resonate or you don't, you know what I mean? And same thing. So it's like, because that wound is there, everyone's always kind of trying to, again, like, you know, have everyone like them unconsciously. Like, this is all unconscious, right? That's that solar plexus chakra. And it's like, if you're trying to please everybody, it's just unfortunate. Like, let's say you have your own goal in mind. Well, it's going to be hard for you to get to that goal if you're trying to make this person happy and then that person happy. Obviously, as long as it's something that's like, you know, like good and ethical, okay? Like we're not going into like the shadow aspects of life. Like, as long as your goal is something that's like going to prosper you and maybe the collective and whatever, right? So it's really this. And also, another thing that I want to talk about as well, since we're kind of on the topic, is, you know, in terms of like gurus and people wanting to be elevated in this way, like a lot of these people haven't actually integrated narcissism and like the narcissistic shadow. So that's another thing too, okay? I have a video on this on my metaphysical playlist, okay? So I talk about the metaphysics behind narcissism, okay? And it's like, not everyone is a narcissist, no. But a lot of people possess a lot of narcissistic qualities and traits because the system has been that way, okay? So because it's been this way, I find it really interesting. Like, it's like the separation of the light and the shadow. It's what I was saying to you guys way at the beginning of this live, okay? It's like when you're in this separation, right? Like what happens is people go into light, right? Like they discover maybe spirituality and like the high vibrations and everything's great and it's awesome, but they haven't integrated the shadow. And it's like, if you don't integrate your shadow, it's always creeping behind the scenes, right? It's always there, right? Because it's not integrated. And it's interesting because I remember when I did my yoga teacher training, we had to write an essay on a spiritual guru, okay? And there was a list of spiritual gurus, and my essay, sorry, I'm just dying. Just like, I have Lilith and Aquarius, you all, okay? So in my essay, I was like, I'm not picking any of these gurus because all of these gurus that were on the list had like some form of allegations against them, and they literally used their power to like do their shady activities. Do you know what I mean? So thank you so much for the likes, you guys. So that was my whole essay, okay? My whole essay was about why I'm not picking any of the spiritual gurus, because of this whole concept of like them not being integrated and just trying to get to power, and they, you know, are kind of executing whatever other things. Some things I can't say on here, unfortunately, but if you Google literally any of the spiritual quote unquote gurus back in the day, at least, right? The ones who are on these pedestals, they always have something shady happening behind the scenes because they're not integrated. It's that separation, right? So all of us, right? This is why I talk about the tragic flaw. I made that video. It's in my, probably my metaphysical playlist, okay? I talked about the tragic flaw because it's like, it's this, okay? You get to this point of like maybe, you know, a dream, or you're in some sort of light, like, you know, thing that you wanted to bring through and manifest, but you haven't integrated your shadow, right? And usually there's that one trait, right? That could be a shadow. Maybe it's negligence. Maybe it's not paying attention. Maybe it's being overconfident. Maybe it is narcissism. Maybe it is taking advantage, like whatever it is, right? There's something there. And then that ends up being the person's downfall. Like that's a concept in literature, but I've seen it play out on like the world stage as well, right? So it's interesting. All these things in life are interesting. Exactly. Oh my gosh, K-Ted, I love it. And you said even now with the gurus have all kinds of cult allegations. Yes. And then you said NS-UL stuff. Exactly. That's what I was alluding to. What else did you say? And then you said people give up their vessel to let someone channel through them instead of stepping up and speaking their truth. Exactly. That's exactly it. That is exactly it. Okay. And it's interesting because it's like in religion. Okay. That's why the religion. So all religions, this is what I want everyone to understand. All religions, because I made it my goal to read the spiritual aspect of all religions. Okay. All religions are very similar. They all start from some sort of spiritual impulse concepts, right? And they all, if you take out like the patriarchal lens, right, and like the view on it and whatever it is today, I call it broken telephone, okay? It's broken telephone today, but if you look at the core of it all and where it all originated from, a lot of these things make sense. A lot of them talk about channeling being quote unquote demonic because they say you don't know what you're tapping into. And I'm not trying to put fear out there in terms of people channeling. Like everyone can do whatever they want, right? But the thing is, it makes sense because it's like, if you haven't integrated your shadow once again, right, and you have that maybe shadow trait, something that happens with a lot of spiritual people also is the money wound, okay? This is another one. So this is the root chakra shadow, okay? So they have the money wound, and who knows, maybe they start making a lot of money and maybe they want to, I don't know, like make a lot of money or whatever it is, it's fine, right? But you know, because maybe they have these gifts and maybe they're a little bit more advanced than other people, maybe they start to manipulate. Maybe they start to trick. And that's that narcissistic demon or entity really that hooks into a lot of spiritual people that haven't integrated, right? So it's like, if you're going to manipulate people, like go be a stockbroker. Do you know what I mean? Like don't pry on like poor, innocent, vulnerable people, because what people need to understand in terms of spirituality, like for a lot of people, when they turn to spirituality, it's like when everything else hasn't worked, right? So it's like to pry on that group of people, like it's just like bad karma, like bad juju all around town. Okay, let's get back to the questions. I hope you guys enjoyed my dissertation. Let's see what else you guys saying in here. So true about the 12th house. Yes. Saturn and Libra. Okay, so it's interesting. I was considered from Saturn onwards the generational planets, but then some people say it's from Jupiter onwards. Okay, so Saturn is a generational planet. So when you have Saturn in Libra, you're going to share it with a group of people within the 3-year brackets, okay? So the house is always going to affect you more. The sign will still affect you, yes, but the house is always going to affect you more. It's the area of life that Saturn is being expressed through. The Libra energy is going to be how the energy is being expressed, okay? So when you have Saturn in Libra, basically Saturn is the area that you get restricted in, especially when you're younger. So Saturn, like all of the planets have their quote unquote maturity. Saturn, they say, usually matures around the age of 35 after you've gone through enough Saturn cycles, right? To basically clear the karma and kind of master that area. So with Saturn, it's like whatever sign you have in here or even house, you're mastering that particular area because it gets restricted for usually by the father figure when you're younger. If it's not the father, dominant masculine role in your life. And then eventually it's going to be your teachers or your managers, like people who are in that superior position above you, okay? So Saturn and Libra, the area that's restricted for you are relationships, are going to be your partnerships, okay? It could even be like things like maybe an artistic expression, for example, when you have Saturn and Libra. So people within your generation and within that 3-year bracket all kind of get restricted in that particular area. Maybe you want to, be in fashion or do makeup or something of the sort. Saturn is restricting this for you, but you're also mastering it at the same time. So you can also look at it as you mastering relationships in this lifetime, the long-term relationships, the relationships that are like, maybe friends for life, like whatever it is, you're mastering that area. But in the earlier part of your life, you could really want it, right? Because Libra is always looking for the one, oh, I want someone to complete me. I want to be with this person. I want to be with that person, right? So that's what Saturn's restricting for you, is really what that is. Let's see what else you guys are saying in here. Thank you, K10. Thank you. Thanks for the vibes. Let me just go back up and see what else are you guys saying in here. You said, what role does Capricorn play in your 8th house and Jupiter in your 8th house? What does Taurus bring to your psyche and the 12th house? Okay, so is Taurus occupying your overall 12th house? You have Capricorn in your 8th house, and then you have Jupiter in your 8th house. Let me know if you have Jupiter in Capricorn also in your 8th house. So there's that metaphysical energy, okay? So Jupiter in the 8th house is going to try to, you'll always hear Jupiter in the 8th house people being like, I want to manifest, or doing all kinds of like rituals, or like this candle magic and like that candle magic, like that's all very Jupiter in the 8th house, right? But I don't know what to tell you guys, because the more that I learn astrology, the more I start to learn that you can't really control too much. You can kind of play within the rules of the game, if that makes sense. So that's a struggle with the 8th house. The 8th house can sometimes get caught up in all these things and like the get money fast and trick this and trick that and do this type of thing and that type of thing. So I don't know, it's like a chicken and the egg thing. Taurus in the 12th house. Taurus in the 12th is your unconscious. So you unconsciously behave like a Taurus, okay? So I always wonder, okay, if you have Taurus in your 12th, I'm curious to know what's in your first. Do you have Taurus also in your first? Or do you have, what's after Taurus? Gemini in your first house, okay? Because basically the way that the energy works is like, let's say you are a Gemini rising and you have Gemini in your first house. To the world, you might come off like, very fun and, friendly, and you have a lot of friends, but in your unconscious, you're also giving off Taurus energy. I find personally, this is just my own findings, I don't know if this is like facts, I just find that the 12th house, if it's also unintegrated and you're unaware of what's going on in that house, you actually give off more of the 12th house energy versus the first house energy, okay? Maybe like when someone first meets you, it's the first house, but overall, like, because it's unconscious, again, it's like when you're unaware of something, you kind of exude the energy more. I hope that makes sense. It's almost like seeping out of you, right? So Taurus in the 12th house wants the material gains, right? They want to have money. They want to have the nice things. They want to have the house and the car and the luxurious vacation and the career and the empire. Like that's kind of like the vibe. Taurus is always about empires and building an empire and these types of things, okay? So that's Taurus in the 12th house. You also want to see what are the shadows of Taurus, right? Because usually the 12th house is the unconscious and it's the shadows as well. So shadows of Taurus, being petty or stingy or not wanting to share or being like very like, that's my fork, I bought that. That's my bag, I bought that. Don't touch that. That can be Taurus in the 12th. Also, Taurus in the 12th can struggle to enjoy. They can struggle to, you know, really enjoy like what they have built. Because sometimes what happens with Taurus people is like when they're younger, they might not have the things. So they could be used to living and like saving mentality and saving their money. And, you know, I'm not going to spend on this vacation, but it's like eventually Taurus gets to that point where they do have the money, right? But they might still think how they used to think when they didn't, you know what I mean? So they might not enjoy the money that they've made. So sometimes Taurus can deal with the sacral chakra in this way, where it's like they might not allow themselves to enjoy, or they might not actually enjoy, or you can go into the complete opposite where you enjoy a little bit too much, okay? You have a little bit too much fun and overindulgence, because Taurus also in the 12th can go into gambling, okay? They can go into like sex addiction, anything that feels good. It's all about the senses, eating, right? Food, right? So it can kind of go into one of these two extremes. Oh, that's a very good question. If I was allowed to practice only one religion for my lifetime, which one would you pick? That's so interesting. It's so interesting when you guys ask me questions, because sometimes when I'm thinking about things earlier in the day, then the question comes up. It's a really, really good question. It's hard to say. It's so funny because I was just answering this to people in my head earlier today. Like, I pick things from all religions that really do resonate with me, but if I had to say one that I do feel like is closest to my belief system, it's probably going to be either Hinduism or Buddhism, okay? It's one of those two. That's closest to my belief system and like my belief system through experiencing, okay? So that's what I have to say about that. Let's see what else you guys saying in here. But all religions have some truth in them for sure, I would say. Let's see what else you guys saying in here. How would a Pisces sun, Scorpio moon person be? Scorpio moon, okay, so interesting. So I'm recording the Pluto videos, and I was just doing Pluto in the 4th house video. Pluto in the 4th house, Scorpio in the 4th house, Scorpio moon, okay? So it's gonna resonate for everybody that has this. Scorpio moon people basically go through a lot of trials and tribulations when it comes to their emotions and their emotional world, okay? So what everyone has to understand about Plutonian energy, Scorpio energy, okay, is that it goes through that pendulum. It's the theme of the chat today, right? It goes through this pendulum of this extreme and then that extreme and this chaos and then that chaos, and then it neutralizes, okay? So for Scorpio moon, it's on the emotional level, right? So you go through this intensity and then that intensity, and then eventually what happens is like you become like, you know, emotionally strong is really what that is in a way, right? Because that's kind of what you're neutralizing within yourself. So you guys can kind of look at Scorpionic energy like this, okay? Pisces sun is going to be creative. Like, you're going to have to express yourself creatively. You're probably going to be very like familiar to people with a Pisces sun. People might say things to you like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I met you before, or you seem so familiar to me. Pisces sun is always going to be creative. The father though for Pisces sun could have maybe like been in an addiction of some sort, or an escapist, or maybe he was just like working all the time. Like that could also happen for Pisces sun. But yeah, Scorpio moon is intense, absolutely, okay? It goes through a lot, the Scorpio moon, and it's always, you know, something to do with emotional unavailability as well. Maybe the mother was emotionally unavailable because the moon is the mother or the home when you were growing up. So what happens for a Scorpio moon person is like the whole reason Scorpio moon becomes very psychic and intuitive is because from a young age, they start to pick up on the external surroundings not matching their internal world, okay? So what do I mean by this? You know, maybe when you're younger, let's say the parents were struggling financially. Maybe you didn't even have to know that as a child, but maybe you picked up on a vibe, right? Like you picked up on something off. Maybe they would say to you, oh, everything's okay, everything's fine. But you picked up on the vibe being off, right? So that's kind of how like that Scorpio moon slowly becomes very intuitive, or like the human lie detector, like all these things, right? Because, you know, from a young age, in a way, they feel tricked. Or also what happens with Scorpio moon is like, you know, as they grow up, maybe they can see certain things about the mother or the home. Or if it's not, you know, the mother, it could be the dominant feminine role in your life, or the grandma, like whoever was that dominant feminine role for you, you see something that is different about them, right? Like that's the whole thing, right? Because Scorpio, again, is the undercurrents of energy. Like it's things that are unseen. So if you were to spend time developing your intuition, you would be super intuitive, super psychic, super like good at reading people, even a medium, right? Because Scorpio moon can become eventually a medium as well, especially anyone who has strong clairsentience. If you spend the time exercising the clairsentience, you can eventually move into mediumship, okay? Oh my gosh, you said you knew I would say Buddhism? I love it. That's awesome. Let's see what else you guys saying in here. It's so funny because I remember saying that as a kid. It's so wild how like, I don't know, just like intuitive we are as children, or just like how we pick up on things. Because I remember saying that as a child without ever having been exposed, or even like past life things. Like, I don't know, like I remember saying that as a kid. Let's see what else you guys saying in here. Moon conjunct Mars in Taurus in synastry. Moon conjunct Mars. Yeah, okay, these dynamics, Moon conjunct Mars, are very sexually fueled. It's very attractive. It's very intense. It depends who's the moon and who's the Mars. Usually, like, you know, the thing is with moon synastry, the moon person is always more affected, I would say, okay? Unless you have like the strong internal emotional world, your emotions are constantly being pulled, okay? Because the Mars person, within the moon person, the Mars person sees their goals, right? Like the potential being manifested. And then the moon person wants to make that happen for the Mars person. So yeah, there could be a lot of loving time with these two people. There could be a lot of reproduction with these two individuals. Let's say it's a long-term relationship. The Mars person is always going to want to keep the moon person around, okay? Let's say it's not romantic. Let's say it's a friendship. Well, very similarly in a friendship, right? The Mars person wants to keep the moon person around. It's always deep too, right? This dynamic, but that's really what it is with moon conjunct Mars, okay? There's always something going on in terms of like attraction and wanting the two people, like they kind of feel like they're like fueling each other, right? Like the moon person feels like they're helping the Mars person maybe with their goals and their ambitions is really what that is. Let's see. What else are you guys saying in here? Would having South Node conjunct the Ascendant in a relocated chart bring you face to face with your past? Yes, any sort of South Node conjunctions, you're going to have something coming up from a past life, even if it's like in your own chart or if it's in a synastry. Anything that's conjuncting your South Node is past life stuff coming up and coming to the surface to be looked at and cleared, basically. Cancer North Node in the 8th house. So your overall life purpose is helping people, okay, being nurturing. Also, the 8th house can be you transforming people or helping people transform in one way, shape, or form. So because it is in Cancer, maybe something like to do with the emotional world. I don't know. I also saw like cakes, you know those people who made like cakes for like birthdays, those like really nice ones. It could be something like this. But 8th house has anything to do with transformation. So it could be like personal training, or you help someone transform their finances, or a personal development journey, like all these things, okay? Let's see what else you guys saying in here. You said Lilith in the 1st house. Is it similar to having Pluto in the 1st? It's interesting because a lot of the time I say that Lilith is like Pluto's little cousin, right? Like Scorpio's little cousin. So it's not the same. It's not the same, but it does take similar undertones because Lilith is a dark aspect of the self. So you have to look at the 1st house to see what are shadows that the 1st house has, okay? So the 1st house is going to be maybe a little bit too aggressive, right? In terms of getting their goals, where they kind of like trample over people or dog eat dog. Like it could go into this energy, right? Where it's going to do anything to be number one and be the best. Or it could be selfish, this energy as well. So just something that you have to basically neutralize within the self. You said, not sure if this is asked yet, but would love to know more about Neptune and Capricorn in the 8th house. Okay, so Neptune and Capricorn, that's the generation. So that's the subset of millennials. Some Gen Zs have this as well. So the house is going to affect you more than the Capricorn, because the Capricorn you're sharing with that whole subset of the generation, okay? It's a generational planet. So Neptune and Capricorn people, these are the people who got labeled as entitled millennials. I have a video. If you have the conjunction with Uranus and Neptune and Capricorn, that video might resonate. That'll be under my, I think, miscellaneous astrology playlist. So yeah, that's that entitled millennials generation where it's like, they're not actually entitled, but they got labeled this because it's like, you know, they came through, they wanted to, you know, get to the top right away. Maybe they have a lot of education. Maybe, you know, they're very entrepreneurial. Maybe they want to start their own business. Neptune is blurring this, right? It's making it like hard to see. That's what Neptune does. But it's like also because it's Capricorn and the Capricorns over an extended period of time, Neptune wants everything to manifest right away. So Neptune can spend a lot of time dreaming about it. Oh my gosh, when it's like this and it's like that, right? So a lot of these people are going to get a break now when Pluto leaves Capricorn finally, okay? So there's been a lot of clearance for that particular conjunction. Now the 9th house is going to affect you more. So the area that you don't see clearly in your life is 9th house types of things. Also the area that you escape through, that you think about a lot. Maybe you get a lot of downloads in this particular area as well. So wherever you guys have Neptune in your chart, you have to figure out how you can ground the information so you don't spend too much time in your crown thinking about it and dreaming about it, right? So Neptune in the 9th house, right? It's about philosophies. It's going to be about anything to do with maybe even religions or learning about them or the higher mind, like all these things, okay? That's Neptune in the 9th house is really what that is. So you might not see this area clearly. Maybe you don't see, you know, like religion clearly or spirituality clearly, right? Or maybe you come up with some sort of new philosophy that you want to share with the world, right? But you have to figure out how to ground it and anchor it, okay? That's kind of how it works. Partner has Uranus opposite Venus and natal. How can that play out in building a relationship? Uranus opposite Venus. These people are very unique when it comes to relationships, okay? So any Uranus aspects to Venus, okay, is going to be something unique and something outside of the norm. So it depends what the norm is. Let's say the norm is everybody gets married and they live together. The Uranus aspecting the Venus person might not want to live with their partner. It could be this, okay? Or it could be a long distance relationship, for example, and it works for both people. Let's say both people just kind of meet up to travel. That could be a way that this plays out, okay? So Uranus opposite Venus, it's like, you know, Venus is wanting to do one thing, Uranus is wanting to do another thing, right? But when it comes to relationships, it's always going to be unique. You're going to attract unique people, even like unique friends and these types of things as well. Yes, I use Placidus. I use the Western Placidus system, tropical. What else are you guys saying in here? Oops. You said you have Sag in the 11th house. You've had to let go of so many people since 2020 and learning to have better relationships that are not codependent. You have one friend now. Yeah. A lot of people have been doing a lot of energetic clearing since 2020. It's been kind of like an accelerated time loop is really what that is since 2020. What defines a cult versus a spiritual leader? Really, really good question. I'm going to say it's the intention behind everything that you do. Okay, so everything comes back down to intention. Okay, I mean, it depends on the perspective as well. I feel like cults are like, I don't know, it's like when the people are being manipulated. You know what I mean? And a lot of the time, like, I feel like the way that we see spirituality and a quote unquote spiritual leader, like it doesn't have to be a guru that is preaching to everybody. It can literally be someone just living in their truth, you know, living their life. Maybe, you know, there's someone who really loves to cook. Why is that person not equally a spiritual leader as someone who is sitting on a podium? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, you know, it's subjective, I guess, right? Like it's hard to define, but a cult itself is like when the people are actually being manipulated. And cults also, you know, a lot of the time they are very narcissistic in a sense where it's like people get cut off from their loved ones or they get cut off from their families or like they become codependent, right? Like it's an unhealthy dynamic and relationship with like maybe the person who's leading the cult. So that's how I would look at a cult. I don't know. That's just my opinion though. Explain Uranus conjuncting Sun in the first house in Scorpio. Okay, that is unique person, okay? Unique personality. I know you're saying you're asking for a friend. Uranus in the first house. I love Uranus in the first house people. Also undertone of Aquarius rising and Aquarius rising people. These people, so unique, so quirky. Like they always have unique experiences. Like one weekend they dress up like a unicorn. The next weekend they're at a basketball game. The weekend after that they're